Welcome to Sleepless History, where we explore the past in soothing detail to help you drift into peaceful rest. Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey through 250 years of American history, celebrating the achievements, innovations, and moments that have shaped the United States. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin our tranquil exploration of a nation's remarkable story. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the United States, it seems fitting to reflect on the extraordinary journey this nation has undertaken. From 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast to 50 states spanning a continent, the American story is one of growth, innovation, and the persistent pursuit of ideals. Tonight, we'll explore this history not through conflict and controversy, but through the lens of achievement, progress, and the countless contributions Americans have made to their nation and the world. Our journey will be detailed and unhurried, perfect for those seeking to learn while they relax into sleep. We'll examine the founding principles, the expansion of democracy, scientific achievements, cultural contributions, and the steady march toward a more inclusive society. Each section will unfold slowly, allowing your mind to wander through history as you drift toward rest. Part 1. The Founding Era and Constitutional Innovation. In 1776, a group of colonial representatives gathered in Philadelphia to draft a document that would echo through centuries. The Declaration of Independence, primarily written by Thomas Jefferson, articulated principles that were revolutionary for their time. The assertion that all men are created equal, that they possess unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words established a philosophical foundation that would inspire movements for freedom worldwide. The Declaration was adopted on July 4, 1776, though the signing process extended through August of that year. 56 delegates eventually signed the document, each knowing they were committing what the British Crown would consider treason. The courage required to affix one's signature to such a document, the belief in principles over personal safety, marked the beginning of a new kind of nation. The language of the Declaration drew from Enlightenment philosophy, particularly the writings of John Locke and his theories of natural rights. Jefferson's eloquent phrasing transformed political theory into inspiring prose. The document laid out not just grievances against King George III, but a vision of what government should be, deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed, existing to secure the rights of the people, and subject to alteration or abolition when it fails in these duties. 11 years after the Declaration, in 1787, delegates gathered again in Philadelphia for what would become the Constitutional Convention. The Articles of Confederation, America's first governing document, had proven inadequate for managing a growing nation. The convention, held in the same Pennsylvania State House where the Declaration had been signed, brought together 55 delegates from 12 states. Rhode Island, skeptical of centralized power, declined to participate. The convention took place during the summer months, from May 25th through September 17th. The delegates met in secret, with windows closed despite the Philadelphia heat, to allow for frank discussion without public pressure. James Madison, a delegate from Virginia, took detailed notes that provide our most complete record of the debates and discussions that shaped the Constitution. The resulting document created a federal system of government, balancing power between states and a central authority. The Constitution established 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial, each with carefully defined powers and the ability to check the others. This system of checks and balances was designed to prevent any single entity from accumulating too much power. The legislative branch, Congress, was divided into 2 chambers: the House of Representatives, with members apportioned by population, gave larger states greater representation. The Senate, with 2 senators from each state, regardless of size, protected smaller states' interests. This Great Compromise, also known as the Connecticut Compromise, resolved one of the convention's most contentious debates. The executive branch, headed by a president, would execute the laws and serve as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president would be chosen not by direct popular vote, but by an electoral college, with electors chosen by each state. The term was set at 4 years, with the possibility of re-election. The judicial branch, headed by a Supreme Court, would interpret laws and resolve disputes. The Constitution allowed Congress to establish lower federal courts as needed. Federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, would serve during good behavior, effectively lifetime appointments, to insulate them from political pressure. The framers also included a process for amending the Constitution, recognizing that the document would need to evolve with the nation. Amendments could be proposed by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress, or by a convention called by 2/3 of state legislatures, then ratified by 3/4 of the states. The Constitution faced opposition during ratification debates. Anti-federalists worried about the power of the central government and the absence of explicit protections for individual rights. To address these concerns, James Madison drafted a series of amendments that would become the Bill of Rights. The first Congress proposed 12 amendments in 1789, 10 of which were ratified by December 15, 1791. These 10 amendments established fundamental rights that have shaped American law and culture ever since. The First Amendment protected freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. These 5 freedoms, contained in a single sentence, created space for religious diversity, robust public debate, a free press, peaceful protest, and citizen engagement with government. The Second Amendment addressed the right to bear arms in the context of well-regulated militias. The Third Amendment, responding to colonial-era grievances about quartering soldiers, prohibited forcing citizens to house troops in their homes during peacetime. The Fourth Amendment protected against unreasonable searches and seizures, requiring warrants based on probable cause. The Fifth Amendment established due process rights, protection against self-incrimination, and prohibition of double jeopardy. It also included the Takings Clause, requiring just compensation when government takes private property for public use. The Sixth Amendment guaranteed rights in criminal prosecutions, speedy and public trial, impartial jury, right to know the charges and evidence, ability to confront witnesses, and access to legal counsel. The Seventh Amendment preserved the right to jury trial in civil cases. The Eighth Amendment prohibited excessive bail, excessive fines, and cruel and unusual punishment. The Ninth and Tenth Amendments addressed broader principles. The Ninth stated that listing certain rights in the Constitution did not deny or disparage other rights retained by the people. The 10th reserved to the states and the people all powers not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution. These amendments created a framework of individual liberty that distinguished the American system and inspired constitutional protections worldwide. Part 2. Early National Development. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson completed perhaps the most significant real estate transaction in history. The Louisiana Purchase added approximately 827,000 square miles to the United States, doubling the nation's size. The territory stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Canadian border. The purchase came about almost accidentally. Jefferson initially sought only to buy New Orleans and surrounding areas to secure American access to the Mississippi River and the port crucial for Western trade. Napoleon Bonaparte, France's leader, surprised American negotiators by offering to sell the entire Louisiana territory. Napoleon needed funds for European wars and feared losing Louisiana to the British anyway. He offered the territory for $15 million, working out to approximately $18 per square mile, or about 4 cents per acre. The American negotiators, James Monroe and Robert Livingston, exceeded their instructions by agreeing to purchase the entire territory. Jefferson, despite his strict interpretation of the Constitution, struggled with whether the Constitution granted him authority to purchase territory. He ultimately decided the President's treaty-making power provided sufficient authority, and the Senate ratified the treaty. The Louisiana Purchase secured American control of the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans, vital for Western farmers shipping goods to market. It provided vast lands for agricultural expansion. It removed a potentially hostile European power from America's border, and it set the stage for the nation to eventually extend from Atlantic to Pacific. The territory eventually became all or part of 15 states: Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and portions of New Mexico and Texas. To explore this vast new territory, Jefferson commissioned an expedition led by his personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. The Corps of Discovery, as it was officially known, departed from Camp Dubois near Street Louis in May 1804. The expedition included about 45 people, though the number varied. The group included soldiers, frontiersmen, Clark's enslaved servant York, and eventually a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea and her infant son. The expedition carried scientific instruments, gifts for native peoples, weapons, and supplies. The journey up the Missouri River proved arduous. The Corps spent the winter of 1804 to 1805 with the Mandan people in present-day North Dakota. There they built Fort Mandan and added Sacagawea, her husband Toussaint Charbonneau, and eventually their son Jean-Baptiste to the expedition. In spring 1805, the expedition continued west, crossing the Rocky Mountains with help from Sacagawea's Shoshone people. They built canoes and travelled down the Snake and Columbia rivers, reaching the Pacific Ocean in November 1805. They spent the winter at Fort Clatsop near present-day Astoria, Oregon. The return journey began in March 1806. The expedition split temporarily to explore different routes, then reunited and reached Street Louis in September 1806. They had travelled approximately 8,000 miles over 2 years, 4 months, and 10 days. The expedition collected valuable information about Western geography, native peoples, plants, animals, and resources. Lewis and Clark documented 178 plants and 122 animals previously unknown to science. Their detailed journals provided Americans with their first comprehensive view of Western lands. The expedition established American claims to Oregon country. It opened routes for fur traders and future settlers, and it demonstrated the possibilities of transcontinental travel, contributing to the eventual American expansion to the Pacific. While the Louisiana Purchase added Western lands, developing infrastructure to connect these territories with eastern population centers remained challenging. Rivers provided natural transportation routes, but most rivers flowed north-south, while the nation needed east-west connections. The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, provided that connection. The canal stretched 363 miles from Albany on the Hudson River to Buffalo on Lake Erie. It created a water route from the Atlantic Ocean through New York City, up the Hudson, along the canal, through the Great Lakes, and ultimately to the developing Midwest. New York Governor DeWitt Clinton championed the project despite skepticism from many who called it Clinton's Ditch or Clinton's Folly. Construction began on July 4, 1817. The project required digging through wilderness, building 83 locks to manage elevation changes of about 575 feet, and constructing 18 aqueducts to carry the canal over rivers and ravines. The canal was built primarily by immigrant labourers, particularly Irish immigrants, along with local farmers and workers. The engineering was innovative for its time, with American engineers developing new techniques as European-trained engineers were scarce. When completed, the canal reduced travel time from New York City to Buffalo from about 6 weeks to 6 days. Shipping costs dropped dramatically, from about $100 per ton to less than $10 per ton. This transformed economics throughout the Northeast and Midwest. The Erie Canal made New York City the nation's preeminent commercial center. It stimulated growth in cities along its route. Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo all boomed. It encouraged settlement of the Midwest by making it easier and cheaper to reach and easier to ship crops to eastern markets. The canal's success inspired an era of canal building throughout the country. While most other canals never achieved the Erie's success, they represented American investment in infrastructure to connect and develop the nation. Part 3. Technological Innovation and Industrial Development. In 1793, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin, a simple machine that revolutionized cotton processing. Before the cotton gin, separating cotton fibers from seeds was labor-intensive, limiting cotton production. The cotton gin could do the work of dozens of people, making cotton cultivation far more profitable. The cotton gin transformed southern agriculture and, combined with vast lands and enslaved labor, made cotton America's most valuable export. While the cotton gin's effects on slavery were tragic, the innovation itself demonstrated American mechanical ingenuity. Whitney later pioneered another innovation, interchangeable parts in manufacturing. Contracted to produce muskets for the government, Whitney developed manufacturing methods that produced standardized, interchangeable components. Previously, each musket was handcrafted with parts fitted specifically to that individual weapon. With interchangeable parts, muskets could be assembled from standardized components. Repairs could be made by replacing parts rather than custom fitting new ones, and production could be faster and more efficient. This concept of interchangeable parts became fundamental to American manufacturing and later the assembly line. In 1844, Samuel Morse sent the first telegraph message from Washington to Baltimore. The message, "What hath God wrought?" travelled nearly instantaneously over 40 miles of wire, demonstrating that information could be transmitted faster than physical transportation could carry it. The telegraph represented a revolution in communication. Previously, information travelled only as fast as a person or vehicle could carry it. Letters took days or weeks to arrive. News from distant places was always old news. The telegraph changed this fundamentally. Morse developed not just the telegraph device, but also Morse code, a system of dots and dashes representing letters and numbers that could be transmitted electrically. The system was elegant in its simplicity and effective in its application. Telegraph lines spread rapidly across the country. By 1861, a transcontinental telegraph line connected the east and west coasts, making the pony mail essentially obsolete overnight. By 1866, a transatlantic cable connected North America and Europe. The telegraph transformed business, allowing companies to coordinate across distances. It transformed journalism, enabling newspapers to report on distant events quickly. It transformed warfare, allowing military commanders to communicate rapidly with distant forces. And it transformed daily life, beginning the modern era of rapid communication. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10, 1869, represented one of the 19th century's greatest engineering achievements. The railroad connected the existing Eastern Rail network with California, creating the first rail link across the continent. Two companies built the railroad from opposite directions. The Union Pacific Railroad built westward from Omaha, Nebraska. The Central Pacific Railroad built eastward from Sacramento, California. The two lines met at Promontory Summit in the Utah Territory. Construction faced enormous challenges. The Central Pacific crossed the Sierra Nevada mountains, requiring extensive tunneling and construction on steep grades. Workers, predominantly Chinese immigrants, labored in dangerous conditions, using explosives to blast through granite. The Union Pacific crossed the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains, facing different challenges including harsh weather, difficult terrain, and conflicts with native peoples whose lands the railroad crossed. Workers, including many Irish immigrants and Civil War veterans, laid track at remarkable speeds across relatively flat terrain before hitting mountain ranges. At its peak, the Union Pacific laid 8 miles of track in a single day. The Central Pacific's best day saw them lay 10 miles of track, a record that astonished contemporaries. The railroad's completion ceremony featured a golden spike, though this ceremonial spike was quickly replaced with a standard iron spike for practical use. The golden spike now resides in a museum, but the achievement it commemorated transformed America. The Transcontinental Railroad reduced coast-to-coast travel from months to days. A journey that once took 4 to 6 months by wagon train now took about 1 week by train. This connected the nation as never before, facilitating trade, travel, and communication between East and West. The railroad stimulated economic development throughout the West. Towns sprang up along the route. Agriculture expanded as farmers could ship products to distant markets. Mining boomed as ore could be transported to smelters and markets. And settlement accelerated as reaching Western lands became far easier. On March 10th, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell spoke the first words transmitted by telephone. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." His assistant, Thomas Watson, in another room, heard the words through the telephone receiver, demonstrating that voice could be transmitted electrically. Bell, born in Scotland and later immigrated to Canada and the United States, was working on devices to help the deaf when he developed the telephone. His mother and wife were both deaf, giving him personal motivation to study sound transmission. Bell filed his patent application on February 14th, 1876, just hours before a rival inventor, Elisha Gray, filed a similar patent. This timing gave Bell the patent, though Gray's earlier work contributed to telephone development. The telephone improved on the telegraph by transmitting actual voice rather than coded messages. This made communication more natural and accessible, as users didn't need to learn Morse code or rely on trained telegraph operators. Early telephones required direct wire connections between users. The development of telephone exchanges, where operators manually connected calls, and later automatic switching systems, made the telephone practical for widespread use. By the early 20th century, telephone networks spread across the nation. Long-distance calls became possible as technology improved. The telephone transformed business operations, emergency response, personal relationships, and daily life, making instant voice communication across distances commonplace. Thomas Edison's development of practical electric lighting in 1879 brought artificial light to millions. While Edison didn't invent the electric light bulb, various inventors had created primitive electric lights. He developed the first practical, long-lasting incandescent bulb and, crucially, the complete electrical system to power it. Edison's bulb used a carbonized bamboo filament that could burn for hundreds of hours. He also developed electrical generation systems, wiring, switches, and fixtures, a complete electrical infrastructure. On September 4th, 1882, Edison opened the Pearl Street Station in New York City, the first commercial electrical power plant in the United States. The Pearl Street Station initially served 59 customers, powering about 10,000 lamps in a square mile of Lower Manhattan. The system generated direct current electricity, though later alternating current systems proved more efficient for long-distance transmission. Electric lighting transformed daily life profoundly. Before electric lights, homes and businesses relied on candles, oil lamps, or gas lights, all with limitations and dangers. Electric lights were brighter, safer, more convenient, and cleaner. Factories could operate efficiently after dark. Streets became safer and more navigable at night. Homes became more comfortable and functional in evening hours. Reading, working, and socializing could extend into night without the dimness and inconvenience of earlier lighting. The electrical infrastructure Edison and others developed also powered countless other devices, making electricity central to modern life. Edison's work exemplified the American tradition of practical innovation, solving real problems with workable solutions. Part 4. Expanding democracy and rights. The ratification of the 13th Amendment on December 6, 1865, abolished slavery throughout the United States. The amendment's simple language, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, ended an institution that had contradicted America's founding principles. The path to abolition was long and difficult. The anti-slavery movement built momentum through the early 19th century. Religious groups, particularly Quakers, spoke out against slavery. Free black Americans and escaped slaves, including Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman, became powerful advocates for abolition. The Underground Railroad, a network of secret routes and safe houses, helped thousands of enslaved people escape to freedom in the North and Canada. While the numbers are uncertain, estimates suggest the Underground Railroad helped somewhere between 40,000 and 100,000 people escape bondage. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1, 1863, declared slaves in rebellious states to be free. While the proclamation's immediate practical effect was limited, as it applied primarily to areas not under Union control, it transformed the Civil War into a struggle for freedom and paved the way for the 13th Amendment. After the war's end, the 13th Amendment passed through Congress and was sent to states for ratification. Secretary of State William Seward announced its ratification in December 1865, though the process continued as more states ratified it in following months and years. The abolition of slavery was a moral victory and a step toward fulfilling America's founding promise that all are created equal, while the struggle for true equality continued long after. Ending slavery was essential progress. The ratification of the 19th Amendment on August 18, 1920, guaranteed women's right to vote throughout the United States. The amendment's key sentence read, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The women's suffrage movement had roots in the 19th century. The Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, issued a declaration of sentiments modeled on the Declaration of Independence, asserting that women were created equal to men. For decades, suffragists campaigned, organized, and advocated. Leaders included Susan B. Anthony, who was arrested for attempting to vote in 1872, Lucy Stone, who kept her birth name after marriage, and advocated for property rights for married women, Ida B. Wells, who connected suffrage to racial justice, Alice Paul, who organized more militant protests and hunger strikes. The movement faced opposition and setbacks, but persisted. Some Western states granted women voting rights before the federal amendment. Wyoming Territory granted women's suffrage in 1869, even before becoming a state. Other Western states followed: Utah, Colorado, and Idaho in the 1890s. During World War I, women's contributions to the war effort strengthened arguments for suffrage. Women worked in factories, served as nurses, supported the war effort in countless ways. President Woodrow Wilson, initially opposed to suffrage, changed his position and supported the amendment. The amendment passed Congress in 1919 and was ratified in 1920. Tennessee's ratification provided the final necessary state. The ratification was close, reportedly decided by one young legislator's vote, influenced by a letter from his mother urging him to support suffrage. Women voted in the 1920 presidential election, the first in which women nationwide could participate. The achievement represented decades of organized effort and expanded American democracy significantly. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s achieved landmark advances in racial justice, while the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments had abolished slavery and guaranteed equal protection and voting rights after the Civil War. These promises remained unfulfilled in much of the country, particularly the South. The movement had many leaders, participants, and moments, each contributing to progress. Rosa Parks's refusal to give up her bus seat on December 1st, 1955, sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. For 381 days, African Americans in Montgomery, Alabama, boycotted the city buses, walking or carpooling instead. The boycott ended when the Supreme Court ruled bus segregation unconstitutional. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a prominent leader during the Montgomery boycott and continued leading the movement for racial justice until his assassination in 1968. King advocated non-violent resistance, inspired by Gandhi's methods. His eloquent speeches, including his I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, articulated the movement's vision of racial equality and justice. The March on Washington brought approximately 250,000 people to the nation's capital, one of the largest political rallies in American history. The march supported civil rights legislation and demonstrated the movement's broad support. Countless individuals showed courage during this era. The Little Rock Nine integrated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, facing hostile crowds while federal troops protected them. College students staged sit-ins at segregated lunch counters, peacefully requesting service while facing harassment and arrest. Freedom Riders rode interstate buses into the South to test enforcement of desegregation, facing violence and arrest. These efforts led to landmark legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. President Lyndon Johnson signed it into law on July 2, 1964. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 addressed obstacles that prevented African Americans from voting despite the 15th Amendment. The Act banned literacy tests and other discriminatory practices, and provided for federal oversight of elections in areas with histories of discrimination. President Johnson signed it on August 6, 1965. These achievements represented progress toward fulfilling America's founding promise of equality, expanding democracy and justice to include all citizens regardless of race. Part 5. Scientific Achievement and Exploration. The Panama Canal, completed in 1914, stands as one of engineering's great achievements. The 51-mile canal crosses the Isthmus of Panama, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and eliminating the need for ships to travel around South America. France initially attempted to build the canal in the 1880s, but failed due to engineering challenges and disease. Yellow fever and malaria killed an estimated 22,000 workers during the French attempt. The United States took over the project in 1904 after helping Panama gain independence from Colombia. The American effort benefited from advances in understanding disease transmission. Dr. William Gorgas led efforts to control mosquitoes, dramatically reducing yellow fever and malaria deaths. The engineering challenges were immense. The canal required excavating approximately 200 hours, 50 million cubic yards of earth and rock, more than 4 times the amount excavated for the Suez Canal. The canal used a lock system, raising ships 85 feet above sea level to cross the continental divide, then lowering them back to sea level. The locks were engineering marvels. Each lock chamber was 110 feet wide and 1,000 feet long. The lock gates, the largest moving pieces of machinery at the time, weighed up to 750 tons each. The entire system required precise engineering to fill and empty the massive chambers quickly and safely. Approximately 75,000 workers from around the world laboured on the canal over 10 years. The work was dangerous, with machinery accidents, landslides, and dynamite explosions claiming lives. Estimates suggest about 5,600 workers died during American construction, far fewer than during the French attempt, but still a significant toll. The canal opened on August 15th, 1914. The first ship to transit was the SS Ancon. The canal reduced the voyage from New York to San Francisco from around 13,000 miles to about 5,200 miles. Transit time dropped from months to hours. The Panama Canal facilitated global trade, strengthened American naval capability by allowing the fleet to move more easily between oceans, and demonstrated American engineering prowess. It remains one of the world's most important waterways, with expansion completed in 2016 to accommodate larger modern ships. On December 17th, 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright achieved the first powered, sustained and controlled airplane flight near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The flight lasted 12 seconds and covered 120 feet, less than the wingspan of a modern jetliner. But it proved that powered flight was possible. The Wright brothers, bicycle mechanics from Dayton, Ohio, approached flight systematically. They studied bird flight, previous aviation attempts, and aerodynamic principles. They built a wind tunnel to test wing designs. They developed 3-axis control, allowing the pilot to control the aircraft's pitch, roll, and yaw. Their first aircraft, the Wright Flyer, was powered by a 12-horsepower engine they built themselves, as no suitable commercial engine existed. The aircraft had a wingspan of 40 feet 4 inches and weighed about 605 pounds without pilot. That first day at Kitty Hawk, they made 4 flights. The first, piloted by Orville, lasted 12 seconds. The fourth, piloted by Wilbur, lasted 59 seconds and covered 852 feet. These flights proved the concept and launched the age of aviation. The Wright brothers continued improving their designs. By 1905, they had developed a practical aircraft that could fly for 39 minutes and cover 24 miles. By 1908, they were demonstrating their aircraft publicly and securing contracts. Aviation developed rapidly after the Wright brothers' breakthrough. By World War I, just over a decade later, aircraft were being used for reconnaissance, combat, and bombing. By the 1920s, airmail service connected American cities. By the 1930s, passenger airlines offered commercial service. Charles Lindbergh's solo transatlantic flight in 1927, flying from New York to Paris in 33.5 hours, captured global attention and demonstrated aviation's potential. Lindbergh's achievement inspired a generation and accelerated aviation development. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in 1932, advancing both aviation and women's opportunities in the field. Her courage and skill made her an international celebrity and role model. By the late 20th century, aviation had transformed travel, commerce, and military capability. The United States became a leader in aviation technology, producing innovative aircraft and contributing to the industry's growth. The Manhattan Project, launched in 1942, brought together scientists, engineers, and resources to develop atomic weapons during World War II. While the weapons themselves brought unprecedented destructive capability, the project also advanced nuclear physics and led to peaceful applications of atomic energy. The project was enormous in scale. At its peak, it employed approximately 130,000 people across multiple secret sites. The main research and production facilities were in Los Alamos, New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. Leading scientists included J. Robert Oppenheimer, who directed the Los Alamos Laboratory, and numerous physicists who had fled Europe, including Enrico Fermi, who had escaped fascist Italy, and Leo Szilard, who had fled Nazi Germany. These scientists brought cutting-edge physics knowledge to the American effort. The project achieved the first controlled nuclear chain reaction on December 2nd, 1942, beneath the University of Chicago's football stadium. Fermi led this experiment, proving that nuclear energy could be controlled and harnessed. The first atomic device was tested on July 16, 1945, near Alamogordo, New Mexico, in a test called Trinity. The successful test demonstrated that the theoretical physics could produce a working weapon. The intense light and heat, the mushroom cloud rising into the sky, revealed a new form of energy. After the war, attention turned to peaceful applications of atomic energy. The Atomic Energy Act of 1946 established civilian control of atomic energy. In 1951, electricity was generated from nuclear power for the first time at an experimental station in Idaho. In 1957, the first commercial nuclear power plant in the United States began operation in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. Nuclear power offered the promise of abundant electricity from relatively small amounts of fuel. By the early 21st century, nuclear plants provided about 20% of American electricity. Nuclear medicine used radioactive isotopes for diagnosis and treatment. Nuclear techniques improved agriculture, food safety, and industrial processes. The Manhattan Project also established national laboratories that continued advancing science. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and other national labs became centers for research in physics, materials, science, computing, and other fields, contributing to scientific knowledge and training generations of scientists. On July 20th, 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon's surface becoming the first human to walk on another celestial body. His words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," announced humanity's greatest exploration achievement. The space program began earlier in the 1950s. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, on October 4th, 1957, shocking Americans and sparking the space race. The United States responded by creating NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, in 1958. Early American space efforts faced setbacks but achieved successes. Explorer 1, America's first satellite, launched on January 31st, 1958. The Mercury program, beginning in 1959, aimed to put humans in orbit. On May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard became the first American in space during a 15-minute suborbital flight. John Glenn orbited Earth 3 times on February 20th, 1962, making him the first American to orbit Earth. President John F. Kennedy set an ambitious goal in a speech to Congress on May 25th, 1961, committing America to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely before the decade's end. This goal, announced just weeks after Shepard's brief flight, seemed audacious. The technology, the rockets, the spacecraft, nearly everything needed didn't yet exist. The Apollo program pursued Kennedy's goal. The program built on Mercury and the subsequent Gemini program, which tested techniques needed for moon missions including spacewalks, rendezvous, and docking. The program faced tragedy when Apollo 1 caught fire during a ground test on January 27, 1967, killing astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. The disaster led to spacecraft redesigns and renewed focus on safety. Apollo 8 orbited the moon in December 1968, the first humans to leave Earth orbit and see the moon's far side. The mission sent back the famous Earthrise photograph, showing Earth rising above the lunar horizon, an image that inspired environmental awareness. Apollo 11 fulfilled Kennedy's goal. The mission launched on July 16, 1969, carrying astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. On July 20th, Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the lunar surface in the lunar module Eagle, while Collins orbited in the command module Columbia. Armstrong and Aldrin spent approximately 21.5 hours on the moon, including 2.5 hours outside the spacecraft. They collected lunar samples, planted an American flag, left scientific instruments, and took photographs. They left a plaque reading, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." The astronauts returned safely on July 24th, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. 5 more Apollo missions successfully landed on the moon through 1972, with Apollo 13 achieving a remarkable safe return despite an oxygen tank explosion that prevented its lunar landing. The Apollo program collected 842 pounds of lunar samples, conducted experiments, and expanded human knowledge of the moon and solar system. The program employed approximately 400,000 people and required developing new technologies, including advanced computers, life support systems, materials, and manufacturing techniques. The space program inspired a generation, demonstrated American technological capability, and contributed innovations that found applications in everyday life, including improved computer technology, water purification systems, freeze-dried food, and insulation materials. Part 6. Cultural Contributions and Arts. American literature developed a distinctive voice, moving from European influences to uniquely American themes and styles. The 19th century saw the flowering of American literature with writers who captured the American experience. Washington Irving, in the early 1800s, wrote stories like Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, creating American folklore that endures today. His work helped establish that American settings and characters could sustain engaging literature. James Fenimore Cooper wrote frontier adventures, including The Last of the Mohicans, published in 1826. His leather-stocking tales depicted the American wilderness and frontier life, creating archetypes that influenced later Western literature and film. Edgar Allan Poe pioneered the short story form and created detective fiction with The Murders in the Rue Morgue in 1841. His tales of mystery and the macabre, including The Telltale Heart and The Fall of the House of Usher, demonstrated American excellence in literary craftsmanship. His poetry, particularly The Raven, achieved both popular success and critical recognition. Nathaniel Hawthorne explored America's Puritan heritage in novels like The Scarlet Letter, published in 1850. His psychological depth and symbolic richness elevated American fiction while examining themes of guilt, sin, and redemption in American context. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick in 1850, a whaling adventure that became one of American literature's towering achievements. The novel combined adventure, philosophy, symbolism, and meditations on American character, creating a work of extraordinary ambition and depth. Walt Whitman revolutionized American poetry with Leaves of Grass, first published in 1855 and revised throughout his life. His free verse, celebrating democracy, the common person, and American landscape, broke from European poetic conventions and influenced generations of poets worldwide. His poem, O Captain, My Captain, Mourning Abraham Lincoln, became one of America's best-known poems. Emily Dickinson, writing in seclusion in Amherst, Massachusetts, created nearly 1,800 poems, most unpublished during her lifetime. Her innovative use of form, punctuation, and language created a unique poetic voice. Her poem's publication after her death in 1886 revealed one of American literature's most original talents. Mark Twain, born Samuel Clemens, captured American vernacular and humor in works like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, published in 1876 and 1885 respectively. These novels depicted American childhood, river life, and social issues with humor and insight. Ernest Hemingway later wrote that all modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. The 20th century brought modernist innovation and diverse voices. F. Scott Fitzgerald captured the jazz age in The Great Gatsby, published in 1925, a novel that examined the American dream with lyrical prose and tragic insight. Ernest Hemingway developed a spare, declarative prose style that influenced writers worldwide. His novels, including The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms, and his novella The Old Man and the Sea, earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954. William Faulkner explored the American South with experimental techniques and profound psychological insight. His novels, including The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying, earned him the Nobel Prize in 1949. John Steinbeck depicted working-class Americans and social issues in works like The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939, which told the story of Dust Bowl migrants. He received the Nobel Prize in 1962. These writers and many others established American literature as a major force in world literature, creating works that captured American experience while exploring universal human themes. Jazz, born in New Orleans in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, became America's most original musical contribution to world culture. The music combined African rhythms, blues, ragtime, and European harmonic traditions into something entirely new. Early jazz emerged from African American communities in New Orleans, where diverse musical traditions mixed. Musicians played in brass bands, at dance halls, in clubs, and on the streets. The music emphasized improvisation, syncopation, and individual expression within ensemble playing. Louis Armstrong, born in New Orleans in 1901, became jazz's first great soloist and one of music's most influential figures. His trumpet playing demonstrated technical brilliance and emotional expressiveness. His vocal style, including scat singing, influenced singers across genres. Recordings like West End Blues and What a Wonderful World showcased his artistry. Duke Ellington, leading his orchestra from the 1920s through the 1970s, elevated jazz to high art. He composed thousands of pieces, including sophisticated, extended works and classic songs like Take Thee a Train and Mood Indigo. He described his music as American music rather than jazz, recognizing its breadth and significance. The swing era of the 1930s and 40s brought jazz to mass popularity. Big bands led by Benny Goodman, Count Basie, and others filled dance halls. Goodman's concert at Carnegie Hall on January 16, 1938, brought jazz to a prestigious classical venue, demonstrating the music's artistic legitimacy. Bebop, developed in the 1940s, emphasized complex harmonies, rapid tempos, and virtuosic improvisation. Charlie Parker on saxophone and Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet led this revolution, creating music of intense creativity and technical demand. Miles Davis continually reinvented jazz from the 1940s through the 1980s. His albums Birth of the Cool, Kind of Blue, and Bitches Brew each opened new directions. Kind of Blue, recorded in 1959, became the best-selling jazz album ever and influenced musicians across genres. John Coltrane pushed jazz towards spiritual searching and sonic exploration. His album A Love Supreme, recorded in 1964, combined technical mastery with spiritual expression, creating one of jazz's defining statements. Jazz influenced music worldwide. It contributed to rock and roll, rhythm and blues, hip-hop, and countless other genres. It spread American musical innovation globally while expressing African American creativity and experience. Beyond jazz, America contributed many musical forms. Blues, born in the Deep South, influenced popular music worldwide. Country music, rooted in Appalachian folk traditions, became a major American genre. Rock and roll, emerging in the 1950s, combined blues, country, and rhythm and blues into music that transformed global youth culture. American musicals, from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma, to Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story, to Stephen Sondheim's sophisticated works, created an art form blending theatre, music, and dance. Broadway became synonymous with musical theatre, attracting audiences worldwide. The motion picture industry, though invented in multiple countries, flourished in America, particularly in Hollywood, California. American films became the world's most popular entertainment and a powerful cultural export. The silent film era produced American innovations and stars. D.W. Griffith advanced film language with techniques including close-ups, cross-cutting, and narrative sophistication. Charlie Chaplin, an English immigrant, created the beloved tramp character and made films combining comedy and pathos. Sound films, beginning in the late 1920s, opened new creative possibilities. The 1930s and 40s, Hollywood's golden age, produced classic films across genres, musicals, westerns, comedies, dramas, and film noir. Gone with the Wind, released in 1939, became one of cinema's most successful films. Despite problematic racial elements reflecting its era, the film demonstrated Hollywood's technical capability in its Technicolor cinematography, elaborate production design, and ambitious scope. Citizen Kane, released in 1941 and directed by Orson Welles at age 25, revolutionized filmmaking with innovative cinematography, narrative structure, and thematic depth. It's frequently cited as cinema's greatest achievement. Casablanca, released in 1942, combined romance, intrigue, and World War II themes into an endlessly quotable, emotionally satisfying film that remains beloved decades later. American westerns, from John Ford's epics to Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns with American stars, created mythic visions of American frontier history. Films like The Searchers, High Noon, and The Wild Bunch were both popular entertainment and artistic achievements. Musicals like Singin' in the Rain, The Sound of Music, and West Side Story showcased American creativity in combining music, dance, and cinema. American directors achieved international recognition. Alfred Hitchcock, though British-born, made his greatest films in America. Stanley Kubrick created ambitious works, including 2001, A Space Odyssey. Francis Ford Coppola directed the Godfather films. Steven Spielberg made blockbusters and intimate dramas. Martin Scorsese explored American life in films like Taxi Driver and Goodfellas. American cinema continually evolved, from the rebellious 1970s to the blockbuster era beginning with Jaws and Star Wars to the digital revolution. Computer-generated imagery, pioneered by companies like Industrial Light and Magic and Pixar, transformed possibilities. American films influenced global cinema while providing entertainment, artistic achievement, and cultural reflection. The industry employed hundreds of thousands, generated billions in revenue, and made American stories and values visible worldwide. American architecture evolved from colonial styles through innovative modern movements, producing distinctive buildings that shaped skylines and influenced global architecture. Early American architecture adapted European styles to New World conditions. Colonial buildings reflected English, Dutch, Spanish, and French influences depending on region. Georgian and federal styles dominated the 18th and early 19th centuries. Thomas Jefferson, beyond his political contributions, was an accomplished architect. His home, Monticello, completed over decades, combined classical principles with practical innovations. The University of Virginia's campus, which Jefferson designed, demonstrated how architecture could serve educational ideals. The 19th century brought eclecticism, with American architects drawing from various historical styles. Gothic Revival, Romanesque Revival, and Beaux-Arts styles appeared in churches, universities, government buildings, and homes. The development of steel frame construction enabled skyscrapers, America's most distinctive architectural contribution. The Home Insurance Building in Chicago, completed in 1885 and designed by William LeBaron Jenney, is considered the first skyscraper, rising 10 stories. Louis Sullivan, practicing in Chicago, advocated that form should follow function. His Wainwright Building in Street, Louis and Guarantee Building in Buffalo demonstrated how skyscrapers could be both functional and beautiful. His ornamental designs showed that efficiency need not mean austerity. Frank Lloyd Wright became America's most celebrated architect. His prairie-style homes, including the Roby House, emphasized horizontal lines harmonizing with Midwestern landscape. Falling Water, completed in 1937, integrated a home with a waterfall and natural rock, creating architecture in harmony with nature. The Guggenheim Museum in New York, completed in 1959 after Wright's death, created a revolutionary spiral gallery space. The international style, characterized by minimalism, flat roofs, and glass and steel construction, influenced American architecture mid-century. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who immigrated to America, designed the Seagram Building in New York, an international style icon. His principle, less is more, epitomized the style's aesthetic. Skyscrapers defined American cities. The Empire State Building, completed in 1931, rose 1,454 feet, remaining the world's tallest building for decades. The Chrysler Building, completed a year earlier, featured Art Deco styling that made it one of New York's most beloved skyscrapers. The World Trade Center Towers, completed in the early 1970s, introduced a different aesthetic with their minimalist facades and imposing scale. Their destruction on September 11, 2001, shocked the nation and world. Contemporary American architecture continues innovating. The new One World Trade Center, completed in 2014, rises 1,776 feet, a symbolic height referencing America's founding year. Its design combines memorial significance with practical office space. American architecture influences global building design while creating spaces where Americans live, work, worship, and gather, shaping daily experience through thoughtful design. Part 7. Education and Research Universities. The Morrill Land Grant Acts of 1862 and 1890 established a system of public universities that democratized higher education and advanced agricultural and mechanical arts. Senator Justin Morrill of Vermont sponsored the legislation, which granted federal land to states to fund colleges. The 1862 Act gave each state 30,000 acres of federal land for each senator and representative it had in Congress. States could sell this land and use proceeds to establish colleges teaching agriculture, military tactics, and mechanic arts, along with classical studies. The goal was making higher education accessible to working class Americans and addressing practical national needs. This system created institutions including Pennsylvania State University, Michigan State University, Ohio State University, and many others. These universities combined practical education with liberal arts, trained teachers, conducted research, and served their states through extension programs. The 1890 Act provided direct annual funding to land-grant colleges and extended the system to include historically black colleges. This created institutions including Alabama A and M, Alcorn State, and many others, providing educational opportunities for African Americans when most universities excluded them. Land-grant universities democratized higher education, making college accessible to middle and working class students. They conducted research that advanced agriculture, improving crop yields, animal husbandry, and farming practices. Their extension services brought scientific knowledge directly to farmers and communities. The system influenced American higher education broadly, emphasizing public service, practical knowledge, and accessibility. State university systems in California, Texas, New York, and elsewhere expanded educational opportunity to millions. American universities became global leaders in research and graduate education. Johns Hopkins University, founded in 1876, was America's first research university, modeled on German universities but adapted to American conditions. It emphasized original research, graduate training, and advancing knowledge. Johns Hopkins established the model other universities followed. Faculty conducted research while teaching, graduate students pursued doctorates, contributing to knowledge creation. The university published scholarly journals. The medical school, opened in 1893, set new standards for medical education. Other universities adopted this model. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, and others expanded graduate programs and research capacity. State universities like Michigan, Wisconsin, and California developed strong research programs. The GI Bill, passed in 1944, provided education benefits to World War II veterans. Millions attended college who otherwise couldn't afford it. Enrollment surged, campus expanded, and American higher education grew dramatically. The GI Bill democratized college education and contributed to post-war prosperity. By the mid-20th century, American universities led globally in many fields. They attracted students and scholars worldwide. They conducted groundbreaking research in science, medicine, social sciences, and humanities. Nobel Prizes increasingly went to researchers at American universities. American universities created knowledge that advanced technology, medicine, and understanding. They trained leaders in business, government, academia, and professions. They contributed to economic development through research partnerships with industry. They preserved and transmitted culture through libraries, museums, and teaching. The system's diversity, from community colleges to research universities, from public to private institutions, from religious to secular, provided educational paths for students with varied goals and backgrounds. This diversity strengthened American education by serving different needs and encouraging innovation. Part 8. The Interstate Highway System. One of the 20th century's largest public works projects, the Interstate Highway System transformed American geography, commerce, and daily life. President Dwight Eisenhower championed the system, inspired partly by his experience with military convoys and partly by German autobahns he saw during World War II. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized construction of 41,000 miles of interstate highways. The system would connect major cities, facilitate commerce, support national defense by enabling military movement, and improve road safety with controlled access highways featuring multiple lanes, limited exits, and grade-separated intersections. Construction took decades, employing thousands of workers and requiring extraordinary engineering. Highways crossed mountains, deserts, rivers, and urban areas. Major bridges, including the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in New York and the Chesapeake Bay Bridge in Maryland, became engineering landmarks. The system standardized highway design. Interstates were numbered systematically, odd numbers for north, south routes, even numbers for east-west routes, with lower numbers in the west and south. Exit numbers typically corresponded to mile markers. Signs used standardized designs and colors. The consistency made navigation easier and reduced confusion. The interstate highway system cost over $114 billion in original project costs, making it one of history's most expensive public works projects. The federal government funded 90%, with states covering 10%. The highways transformed American life profoundly. They facilitated suburbanization, allowing people to live farther from city centers. They enabled trucking to become the dominant freight transportation mode. They made automobile travel convenient for long distances. They influenced commercial patterns, with businesses locating near highway exits. The system had complex effects. It contributed to urban sprawl. It sometimes divided urban neighborhoods, particularly minority communities. It reduced passenger rail service as highways made automobile travel more attractive. These effects generated legitimate criticism. Yet the highways also created opportunities. They connected rural areas to markets. They made national parks and tourist destinations more accessible. They facilitated commerce that contributed to economic growth. They enabled the rapid movement of emergency services. And they became part of American culture, celebrated in songs, literature, and films about road trips and mobility. The interstate highway system represents American investment in infrastructure, engineering capability, and the belief that mobility and connection strengthen the nation. Part 9. Medical Advances. The development of polio vaccines in the 1950s represented one of medicine's great triumphs. Polio, or poliomyelitis, caused paralysis, death, and fear. Outbreaks struck unpredictably, often during summer months, causing parents to keep children from swimming pools and public gatherings. In the early 1950s, Jonas Salk developed an injectable vaccine using killed poliovirus. The vaccine underwent massive field trials in 1954, involving over 1 million children, called Polio Pioneers. The trial results, announced on April 12, 1955, showed the vaccine was safe and effective. The announcement caused national celebration, with church bells ringing and factory whistles blowing. Mass vaccination campaigns began immediately. Polio cases plummeted. The disease that had killed or paralyzed thousands annually became rare. Albert Sabin then developed an oral vaccine using weakened live virus. The oral vaccine, easier to administer and providing longer-lasting immunity, became the preferred vaccine. It could be given on a sugar cube, making vaccination simple even in areas with limited medical infrastructure. The near eradication of polio in the United States and most of the world demonstrated what medical research and public health efforts could achieve. The success inspired confidence in vaccines and public health measures. American surgeons pioneered heart surgery techniques that saved millions of lives. In 1944, Dr. Helen Taussig and Dr. Alfred Blaylock at Johns Hopkins Hospital developed a surgical procedure with critical contributions from surgical technician Vivian Thomas to treat blue baby syndrome, a congenital heart defect. The surgery, first performed on November 29, 1944, saved a child's life and opened heart surgery possibilities. In 1953, Dr. John Gibbon performed the first successful open heart surgery using a heart-lung machine, which he had developed over decades. The machine temporarily took over heart and lung functions, allowing surgeons to operate on a still heart. This enabled complex repairs previously impossible. Dr. Michael DeBakey pioneered coronary bypass surgery and developed artificial hearts and vascular grafts. His work, spanning decades, advanced cardiovascular surgery and saved countless lives. Dr. Christiaan Barnard, though South African, received training at the University of Minnesota under American surgeons before performing the first human heart transplant in 1967. American research contributed significantly to making transplants possible. Heart disease treatment advanced through drug development, surgical techniques, preventive cardiology, and interventional procedures like angioplasty and stenting. These advances helped reduce heart disease mortality even as the disease remained a leading cause of death. American institutions have led cancer research, developing treatments that have extended survival and improved quality of life for millions. The National Cancer Institute, established in 1937, coordinates federal cancer research efforts. Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and surgical techniques advanced significantly. Combination chemotherapy, using multiple drugs together, improved treatment effectiveness. Targeted therapies attacked specific cancer characteristics rather than all rapidly dividing cells, reducing side effects. The discovery of tumor suppressor genes and oncogenes illuminated cancer's molecular basis. The BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, discovered in the 1990s, explained some hereditary breast and ovarian cancers and enabled genetic testing and preventive interventions. Immunotherapy, harnessing the immune system to fight cancer, emerged as a powerful tool. The development of checkpoint inhibitors, which remove brakes on the immune system, achieved remarkable results in some previously untreatable cancers. Cancer survival rates improved significantly. In the 1970s, the 5-year survival rate for all cancers combined was about 50%. By the early 21st century, it exceeded 68%. For some cancers, improvement was even more dramatic. Research continues, with advances in genomics, personalized medicine, and understanding cancer biology promising further progress. American research institutions, pharmaceutical companies, and funding agencies continue driving innovation. Part 10. Silicon Valley and the Digital Revolution. The development of personal computers transformed how Americans work, learn, communicate, and entertain themselves. While many innovators contributed, several key developments occurred in America, particularly California's Silicon Valley. The Altair 8800, released in 1975 as a kit, is considered the first personal computer, though it required technical knowledge to assemble and use. It inspired hobbyists, including Bill Gates and Paul Allen, who developed a basic programming language interpreter for it, founding Microsoft. Apple Computer, founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, made computers more accessible. The Apple II, released in 1977, came fully assembled and could display color graphics. It succeeded commercially, bringing computers into homes and schools. IBM entered the personal computer market in 1981 with the IBM PC. IBM's entry legitimized personal computers for business use. The IBM PC's open architecture allowed other companies to create compatible computers, spawning an entire industry. Apple's Macintosh, released in 1984, introduced the graphical user interface to mainstream users. The Mac made computers more intuitive with windows, icons, and a mouse, making computing accessible to non-technical users. Microsoft's Windows operating system, first released in 1985 and significantly improved in later versions, brought graphical interfaces to IBM-compatible computers. Windows became the dominant operating system for personal computers. The personal computer industry created enormous wealth, employed millions, and sparked innovations in software, hardware, and services. It enabled new forms of creativity, productivity, and entertainment. It changed education, with computers becoming standard in schools and homes. It transformed business operations, design, publishing, and countless other fields. The Internet, connecting computers worldwide, revolutionized communication and information access. Its roots lay in ARPANET, a network created by the Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency in the late 1960s. ARPANET connected research institutions, allowing researchers to share computing resources and information. The first message was sent on October 29, 1969, from UCLA to Stanford Research Institute. The message was supposed to be login, but the system crashed after transmitting just low. Computer scientists developed protocols for connecting disparate networks. Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol, TCP, IP, developed in the 1970s by Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, became the Internet's foundation. The Internet expanded through the 1980s, connecting universities and research institutions. The domain name system, developed in 1983, made addresses more human-readable, using names like example.com instead of numerical addresses. The World Wide Web, invented by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN in Switzerland in 1989, made the Internet accessible to ordinary users. The web used hypertext links to connect documents, allowing easy navigation between information sources. The first widely used web browser, Mosaic, was developed in 1993 at the University of Illinois by Mark Andreessen and colleagues. Mosaic and its successor, Netscape Navigator, made web browsing simple and visually appealing. The Internet's commercialization began in the 1990s. Companies created websites, e-commerce emerged, and Internet use exploded. By the early 21st century, billions of people worldwide used the Internet for communication, information, entertainment, commerce, and countless other purposes. The Internet enabled innovations including email, social media, video streaming, cloud computing, and mobile apps. It transformed media, retail, education, finance, and nearly every industry. It changed how people communicate, learn, work, and entertain themselves. American institutions, companies, and innovators played central roles in the Internet's development. While the Internet is now global, much fundamental development occurred in the United States, particularly through government research funding, university research, and entrepreneurial innovation. Silicon Valley, the region south of San Francisco Bay, became the world's leading technology cluster. The area's name came from silicon chips manufactured there, but the region produced innovations far beyond semiconductors. Factors contributing to Silicon Valley's success included Stanford University, which encouraged faculty and students to commercialize their research, venture capital firms providing funding for startups, a culture accepting of failure and encouraging of risk-taking, and networks connecting entrepreneurs, investors, and talent. Companies founded or headquartered in Silicon Valley include Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Apple, Cisco, Oracle, Google, Facebook, and countless others. These companies develop technologies including semiconductors, personal computers, networking equipment, databases, search engines, social media, and smartphones. The region's innovation continued through successive technology waves. The semiconductor industry in the 1960s and 70s, personal computers in the 1980s, internet companies in the 1990s, mobile technology and social media in the 2000s, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies in the 2010s and 20s. Silicon Valley's success inspired similar technology clusters worldwide, but the region remained distinctive for its concentration of talent, capital, and culture supporting innovation. The technologies developed there touched billions of lives globally, transforming how people communicate, access information, conduct business, and live daily life. As the United States approaches its 250th anniversary, reflection on this journey reveals a nation of remarkable achievement. From 13 colonies to 50 states, from 3 million people to over 330 million, from an agricultural economy to a technological leader, the transformation has been profound. The principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence, that all are created equal with unalienable rights, have guided progress even when practice fell short of ideals. The Constitution, with its system of balanced powers and protection of rights, has provided stable governance while adapting to changing times through amendments and interpretation. American innovations have transformed daily life globally. Electric light illuminates homes worldwide. Airplanes connect continents. The Internet links billions of people. Medical advances extend and improve lives. These innovations emerged from American creativity, research, and entrepreneurship. American culture has enriched global culture. Jazz, born in New Orleans, influences music worldwide. Hollywood films entertain global audiences. American literature explores universal themes through American experience. These cultural contributions reflect American diversity and creativity. The expansion of democracy and rights, though imperfect and incomplete, represents significant progress. The abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, civil rights achievements, each expanded who was included in America's promise. The work continues, but the direction has been toward greater inclusion and equality. American universities educate students from around the world and conduct research advancing knowledge. American medicine has developed treatments saving millions of lives. American infrastructure connects the nation and facilitates commerce. American space exploration expanded humanity's reach beyond Earth. As America moves toward its 250th anniversary, challenges remain. Economic inequality, racial justice, climate change, political polarization, healthcare access, these and other issues require attention and action. The American story is ongoing, not complete. Yet reflecting on 250 years of achievement provides perspective and inspiration. A nation founded on ideas rather than ethnicity or ancient history has created a system that, despite flaws, has allowed people to pursue opportunity, express themselves freely, and work toward better futures. The innovations, the cultural contributions, the expansion of rights, the scientific advances, all emerged from people committed to progress and willing to work toward it. The commemorating of 250 years is not celebration of perfection, but recognition of achievement and continued potential. The American experiment in self-government, in protecting individual rights while providing for the common good, in uniting diverse people under shared principles, continues. The next chapters remain to be written by future generations who will inherit both the achievements and the challenges of these 250 years. As we conclude this journey through American history, we hope these stories of achievement, innovation, and progress have provided both information and relaxation. The history of the United States offers countless inspiring examples of human creativity, perseverance, and idealism. While challenges always remain, the American story demonstrates what is possible when people commit to principles larger than themselves and work toward common goals. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of 250 years of American achievement. May these stories accompany you into peaceful rest, and may tomorrow bring new opportunities to contribute to this ongoing American story. This has been Sleepless History. Good night and sleep well.